It's Ashley and Brittany. We're here to do our first Shift Your Shit series. And this week, we will be talking about Gene Key 37, Human Design Gate 37. What does this mean? What are we doing here? What is this Shift Your Shit series? So what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to illuminate the different frequencies of the particular gene key. And we're wanting to show you how you can shift out of the shadow frequency, how you can recognize when you're in the shadow frequency, how to get to the gift frequency. We're not going to talk too much about the acidic frequency, but we do want to talk about the gift frequency. So we're shifting out of the shadow to the gift. And Gene Key 37 is all about family alchemy is what the title is. And the archetype for this gene key is family. And if you know anything, you know that we are all family, not just limited by our blood family, right? We're all connected. We're all one. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Shanna. Thanks for hopping on and saying hi, guys. Again, we're doing the Shift Your Shit series. I'm going to mess that up because how maybe fitting into that role of being a mom, being a wife, like that traditional. Maybe you are feeling like you're a victim of that traditional role and you have to rebel against it. Maybe you're in the reactive or the repressive. In the gene key, the repressive nature is over sentimental, and the reactive is cruel. So usually there's an oppressor and oppressive person within the shadow frequency. This one talks a lot about the poles and the masculine and the feminine, and we're going to talk about what it means, because it's just not about man and woman, because we all have these frequencies inside of us. We all have these poles inside of us. There's a masculine and a feminine, and when we don't have balance between the two, that's when it creates this perceived weakness. And that weakness can manifest and show up in different ways. And so you need to ask yourself, since we're hanging out in the shadow frequency right now, where are you weak? Where do you perceive this weakness in yourself? And know that that weakness is only a perception. And to be able to flip that, we are wanting to look at that weakness as an opportunity to become strong in that. Because the weakness always is the seed that gives rise to that strength. Brittany, do you have anything that you want to add to this general gene key?
To kind of expand on that too, is you see this a lot in societies. You're in one camp or another. You're like, men are the head of the household, like women are the inferior sex, right? But then you see that shift to the opposite, where you're like, women like are better than men because we have the babies and we have this. And neither one is, you need to start meeting in the middle and seeing the beauty in the strengths that each one has and how each one is equally important in the household. Because when you start shifting from this whole, and it could be men versus women, it could be race, it could be, career mom versus stay-at-home mom. You tend to go in these extreme camps. And so you really need to understand that we are all one. We are all in the same consciousness, and that one is not better than the other. One is not weak versus the other. It's all the same.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, truth. And so in the equality gift, the gift frequency of equality, remember that at a subatomic level, at a soul level, we are all equal. It's just we perceive this inequality because of the circumstances we are born into. Maybe you identify yourself as a woman, but you're a man. Maybe you are in a very oppressive household where you're beat, you have emotional, physical, or mental abuse. Right. And so everybody has these different circumstances and situations where they have this perception of inequality. And that is true. That is true. But it is overcoming that circumstance. The circumstance does not define you. The circumstance does. You can let the circumstance oppress you, or you can let it empower you, and you can let it become one of your strengths. Because I know that what's his name? Tony Robbins. I can't believe I forgot his name, but Tony Robbins talks about his past and his childhood, and I don't know it too in depth, but I remember him talking about living in in the household with his mother and the things that he had to overcome to be where he is now. He could have played the victim. He could have thought of himself as oppressed, or he could have thought of himself as a victim of circumstance, a victim of his environment, a victim of whatever. But he decided to transcend and overcome that. And despite the cards that he was dealt, he was able to overcome that and create that strength out of that perceived weakness, right? And look at him now. So that can be you, as long as you have the right mindset, the right perspective, and as long as you're not operating from a wounded feminine or a wounded masculine energy. If you were in Ali's group, she did go live and talk about what it means to be in the wounded feminine, what it means to be in the wounded masculine. We want to be operating from the divine masculine and feminine. And it's not because you're a woman, you have to be in the feminine, or because you're a man, you have to be in the masculine. It's about, like Brittany said, meeting halfway. And that's in the physical meeting halfway, but always also within ourselves, where we are meeting halfway. And it's not that the feminine stands on top of the masculine, or that either one oppresses either one. It's about attaining that balance. Because when there's an imbalance of those poles, that's where the shadow of weakness manifests, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. So, okay. So I did want to talk about Carl Jung, or Jung, however you say his name. He was the one that termed the different phrases of like that yin and yang. I don't think he gave that the name, but he called it animus and anima. Animus is the male and anima is the female. And remember, if you don't maintain that balance within yourself, you come at it from the shadow of weakness. And Richard Rudd, where is my notes? Okay, Rudd was saying that in the yang is the masculine. The yang is the anima. And so that's your sharp intellect, that's your determination, that's your resolve, that's your like pressure to get things done, to go enact things in the world. Sometimes in the wounded masculine, it can be force, right? You're forcing things to happen. In the yin, it is soft, it is flexible, and it is open. So they're like this opposites that are attracting, because it is in that polarity that it creates that balance. And so being able to attain that balance within yourself will bring equality to your life, because your internal world will reflect your external world, or your external world will reflect your internal world. So change yourself, change your perception, and you're going to change the world outside of yourself, because you're going to perceive things in a different way, right? Do you have anything to add?
I know from a human design standpoint, this is either it's known as the gate of harmony or the gate of friendship. Mm-hmm. And so this is a very, this gate wants harmony more than anything else. And it has the energy behind it to drive that harmony. So this is all about also experiencing things through like tactile sense as well. So whether or not you have this gate present in your chart, we're in the energy of it right now. So you can feel it, whether or not it's defined. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be like warm handshakes. This is going to be like gentle touches on the shoulder. This is going to be embracing hugs. This is all about mutual respect and the cooperation for the betterment of your tribe. So when you're operating out of that shadow, like you were talking about, you can become, it's when that fear of that weakness or that fear becomes repressed, you turn into this like over sentimental, or almost like doing things that aren't good for you because you're perceived as weaker than somebody else. And then the reactive state of that is when that fear is kind of expressed outward and you have this more like rebellious type. And that's when you basically just become the cruel enforcer, like you were talking about earlier. So when you have mastered this and you shift out of that, it's a really tender quality about you. It's a really, like you're an advocate for everyone to have a voice, whether it be in your relationships, whether it be in your family, with your kids, advocating for your kids to have a voice. But also this could be in your friendships, in your career, all kinds of different relationships that you have, that when you shift out of that shadow and into the gift, this is something really beautiful that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And remember that the weakness that you are perceiving in yourself or in others is just a perception, right? And so to be able to shift out of that, you have to see it is through the shadow that we can get into the gift frequency. And it is in the shadow of weakness that we are perceiving that lack of power or lack of empowerment for whatever that trait is, whatever that thing is that you feel that you are weak. So I know, like, for example, let's say that you feel like you're not creative. And so you see that as a weakness and you're like, okay, I'm not creative. It's a weakness. So I can't do that. So then you give your power away to that weakness and you're like, I can't do that. I can't create my own business because I can't create my own brand. And then I don't have money to pay somebody to do it. And so the same thing with being creative. Like, people have this mindset about creativity, like it has to be like an artist thing, or it has to be this or that. Like, they put creativity in a box instead of looking at it as this limitless potential. Creativity can be getting ideas. Creativity could be being like really good at cooking. Creativity could be so many different things. And the more and more we like cast that out and say, I'm not good at that, so therefore anything labeled as creative, I'm going to say that I can't do that, and that's my weakness. And that way you're not opening yourself up to those possibilities. How many of you have said that I'm not creative? I'm not creative, because that's a big one. So if you you feel that, say yes in the comments, or let us know too, like, where do you feel like you are weak or less than? Like, what trait? And in this gene key, they say, because remember, this is called family alchemy. That's the title of it, and it's the archetype of the family. Think about, let's see what people are raising their hands. Me, wondering how do you shift out of a particular gene key. We're going to talk about how to shift out of it, because it's all about perception, right? So what's happening now is they're saying that this is like a quote that we use. Any group is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So we say that, but that's actually false. That's not true. It's not true that it's only as strong as the weakest link, because it is in the weakness that you have the most potential for growth. So it's actually the binding force that allows you to grow, that allows you to move forward. So when you can identify that weakness, you just found a gift within yourself that you can then grow from and prosper from, because when you're not good at something, there's limitless potential to grow. When you are good at something, it's like, oh, I'm already good at this, right? So it's in your weakness, your perceived weakness, that you can learn more, add more, grow more, and then be that black sheep of the family, weakest link of the family. They're actually giving you guys an opportunity to grow. So like, also say, like, when people feel like they're a victim of their health, right? They're like, oh, our family has a history of heart disease, or whatever the case may be. It's like, okay, well, if you know that you're predisposed to that, how are you going to make sure that doesn't happen? Like, that means that you guys can be really strong and at like choosing healthy choices for eating and working out, and like your family could be really good at heart health, because you know that is a perceived weakness. Like, oh, a lot of people in our family die because of heart disease, right? So how are you going to get proactive instead of like, I'm going to die of heart disease, and just like sit back and be like, that's the case, right? So let's see if there's any comments about, a lot of people are raising their hands. Hannah's saying, numbers, money, finances, I've said it's a weakness. So like, how has that shown up for you, Brittany, with money or finances, or that, like, do you feel like that's a weakness for you? I feel like that's, I mean, a lot of people say, I'm not good with money, I don't know how to make money, all that stuff. Like, what do you feel?
So this is a channel that communication is very important. So I feel like, depending on if you're in a relationship or not, this is the channel of bargains. Mm-hmm. So are you bargaining with yourself because you feel weak? Like, what areas do you feel like you're bargaining? Like, I can't afford to invest in myself because I don't feel like I'm good enough in this area. That's a bargain. I can't go on this vacation because what if I need to go take care of my mom, or what if one of the kids gets sick, or what if we could use that money on something else? That's a bargain. So are you bargaining with yourself in order to compensate for that weakness that you're experiencing? And when you couple it with a relationship, when you have that, and either you have half of that channel and someone else has the other half, when you come together, those agreements are really important, because people with this tend to go into like nonverbal agreements, almost like a say your husband did the laundry for you one day, and you then expect him to like do it all the time for you, even though you never told him, like, hey, I expect this out of the relationship. And then all of a sudden feelings get hurt. And then that has a detriment on your perceived weakness. Like, oh, he didn't love me enough to do this for me. Or, oh, he didn't love me enough to respect me at my time. And so you go into that with somebody else, if you are in a relationship, with all of these expectations, and then you put your self-worth on those expectations. And so you have to be careful when you go into this, that you have clear expectations, whether it be you're in a relationship or you're not. Those expectations you can put on yourself, right? So that can be, yourself can be your hardest critic. So saying, you know, you're not good at finances, that's a perceived weakness. So what is something that you can bargain, right, to make better for yourself? Okay. So today I'm going to, I don't know, make an agreement with yourself. Okay, I'm going to check my checking account every day to make sure that everything is there. Or I'm going to set these little goals to make sure that I'm on the same page with myself on income goals and expectations on money coming in, money coming out. All of those things you can use in order to use to your advantage, especially in the energy of this week, to kind of think and contemplate on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that action step, because remember, any of these perceived weaknesses, you need to figure out how you're going to shift out of that. And you're going to need to feel more empowered, because right now the weakness is like, oh, around number, monies, finance. And if that's a perceived weakness, then how can you feel more empowered around money? And also think about it this way too, like, if you always feel like you don't have enough money, or that you, that you're in lack, how can you empower yourself around the money that you do have? Like I remember when I used to like go to the grocery store and be like, I only have this particular amount of money to spend. And I would like be calculating and be like, okay, I can't spend any more than this. And it was very disempowering. And it was like, I can't get what I want because I don't have. And I remember that the moment I said, fuck it, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and spend whatever the hell I want, it was a super empowering experience. And if you are worried about like your money and stuff like that, move stuff around, like, so that you can have that unlimited budget in your grocery budget, so that you can go and have an empowered experience around it and be like, I don't have to worry about money, because I've allocated enough money to where I really don't think I can spend $300, $400, $500 at the grocery store, you know, because thanks, bud. And that way you're empowering yourself to feel more confident around that money, and you're not limiting yourself. Because I really feel that it's important for us to have a healthy relationship with money, because all of these are relationships, and all energy, all things are energy. So you want to have a healthy relationship with money. And you also don't, another thing, hold on, let me hide this comment. Another thing we tend to do is, as women, we tend to associate our value with money, the money we bring in, because it's in those like gender identities, and in those things where we place ourselves in like the victim role too, and we're saying that, oh, my husband makes more money, therefore he's more valuable than me. And I know that a lot of relationship dynamics happen where it's like, I'm not getting paid for the work that I'm doing, he's getting paid for the work he's doing, so therefore he's in charge of the family. And we place all this power and control on money, and then we are we are disempowering ourselves, right? Because we are associating value with money. And therefore, we're giving more value to our husbands or our partners because they're bringing in the money. We're not giving ourselves any of that, right? Because money is just energy, and we can't do that. And so how would you shift that? How would you not associate the money that you bring in with your value? Because if you don't bring in anything, then your value is down here, right? And your husband brings in all the money, so he's more valuable than you are. You're taking advantage of me, dude. My son's like, I want this.
You get your birthday.
I want food. Here you go, bud. And I did struggle with that for a while. And so whenever my business would do poorly or do less than the month before, I would be like, oh crap, my value equals the money I bring in. Therefore, I feel crappy about myself. So we need to like take away all those labels, take away all those things so that we are feeling more empowered. Right? Because weakness is our unconscious belief that we are powerless. So if I'm feeling weak in that area, I'm feeling powerless. Like I can't determine like what money comes in or out. You know, I feel like that's out of my control. Therefore, I am weak. Therefore, I'm not of value because I can't control it. Right? Yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. Do you have anything to add to that?
When would be a good time to throw up the chart, you think?
We can throw it up right now if you want.
Okay. There's a couple things I do want to point out in the chart. Okay. Just trying to make sure everyone, there we go, can see that. Okay, so if you see this gate 37 right here, and so for me, this is present in not only my human design chart, but my gene key chart. And if you have this present in your chart as well, then, and even if you don't have this present in your chart, it is not, it's all present in the energy right now. So, but if you do have it present, you can see for me, it is 37 for me is right here in my chart. And you can see that it's a third line. So in the Chinese I Ching, this is the hexagram that stands for family. And so depending on what lines that you have is going to be all about like family harmony and family alchemy, like Ashley was talking about earlier. So for some of you, some family things, or I know we keep going back to money, but that could be like a thing in your family that was an issue. And so trying to like break that pattern and raising out of that vibration of lack. And so if you are a line 1, so if you're a 37.1 in your chart, and if you don't have this, take whatever I'm saying that intuitively feels like you, take it and go with it. Okay. So if you're a 37.1, this is breaking old rules. So to bring cohesion to family or your tribe or your friendships, if you don't have a partner, like this is just your immediate family or your tribe or who you hang out with. To bring cohesion to a family, rules and habits are formed. This is a time to break old rules and habits, explore freedom, write a new life story for yourself by breaking old rules. And this will make you wide open to love because it's all about love, right? Okay. If you are a line 2, so you will be 37.2. This is forgiving family. Forgive your family for all they have done. Call or write a relative. Speak from the heart. Own your part in past dramas. Apologize if you can. These simple actions will clear the runway for love to soar in your life. All right, and you can see that I am a line 3. So for me, this is going to be healing old wounds. So what may seem like a difficult situation from your past is really a bridge to deeper love and connection. Make amends, forgive, Set judgments aside. Focus your attention on the present moment. In this way, you will heal old wounds and make room in your life for higher love.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Still trying to figure out how to do this stuff.
Okay.
Let me mute myself. I'm kind of loud.
Okay, so if you're a line 4, this is cooperating is the key to love. There is a greater power in synergy. This is a good time to start a new project with a special someone. Focus on the ways you work well with others, and your sense of connection and intimacy will deepen. Line 5, trust fosters love. When it comes to relationships, trust is what matters most. Trust yourself. Trust opens the door to true love. And then for line 6 is attracting love with truth. Sincerity should be the guiding light for you at this time. Be fair and humble in all that you do. When you are honest with yourself, you become more attractive. Your smile will be contagious, and someone will take note of your greatness. So these are some different ways that you can kind of shift out. And like I said, if you have that in your chart, look at it. If you don't have that number in your chart, take everything that I said and intuitively go with what feels best for you to do to be able to shift out of that low vibration. And then does anybody like to journal or kind of reflect? Because I've got some of the things, some affirmations that you can use too. And you can basically just kind of say to yourself, from the remnants of my past, I discover and I work with my friends, my family, my tribe, my community, and the world to co-create a mutually respected and deeply honoring peace. Peace is within me. I am peace, and I create peace in all that I do, and all is well. And then if you like to focus or write, what areas in your life are you needing peace right now? What areas in your life are you needing harmony? What areas are you perceiving that you are weak? And then reflect on those. What I love about Gene Keys is contemplation. So you don't even need to even really do anything other than contemplate on it in order to kind of shift, right? So other things that you can think about is how can you create a lifestyle that is more peaceful? And then maybe think about, I don't know, a few of those ways that you can create peace in your life. So what things do you need to say no to? What things maybe do you need to say yes to? What things do you need to forgive? Think about all of these things as we're looking to bring like peace and harmony into our lives. And then what new agreements do you need to make with either your friendships or your husbands or your wives, maybe even your kids? What commitments are serving you and what are not? And if they're not serving you, do you need like clear communication when you go into those so that there's peace and equality within those relationships? And what expectations do you have on others? So kind of go into this energy thinking about these things, and then that way it creates that more peace and harmony and equality in your life with your relationships.
Awesome. Thanks for those affirmations. I started to type them up to see if I can get them up, but it would be awesome if you can post those in the group. Yeah, that would be awesome. So guys, I wanted to ask and see, like, is there anything that you want guidance on to help you shift out of? So like, you can let us know of any perceived weaknesses like we did with another commenter. I forgot who commented that about finances. Do you guys want to ask any questions about like, oh, I perceive this as one of my weaknesses. How do I shift out of it? Because we would love to help you shift out of it on this. So like for those of you that are joining live, if you wanted to comment in the replay, you can do that too. Just let us know and we'll pick a comment to help shift out of that perception of weakness. Right? Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to add. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? You did. You said a couple of things that I was going to say. I was like, oh, good job. Telepathy, twins for the win. I did want to mention too, like, because it is a lot about the balance. Like they talk a lot about the balance between the yin and the yang. I want you guys to look at it as like within yourself and outside of yourself. Ask Gigi, and outside of yourself. So the feminine aspect is supposed to carry the vision, and the masculine aspect is supposed to build it. So you can look at that as within yourself and how you are balancing that within yourself. And you can also look at it in the world at large. And right now, what's happening is there's a shift going on where the feminine is rising. And it's not because the feminine is supposed to oppress the masculine or be on top of the masculine. Like, oh, it's our time to rise, girls. Like, it's time for us to take the wheel. It's time for us to be in charge. It's time for the men to step aside. That's not what it's about. It's more about creating the balance again between the two poles. We're still meeting in the middle. We're still holding hands because we are still equal. It's just there was such inequality between the genders, between the masculine and the feminine before, that now there needs to be a rise of that feminine so that it can balance things out. So you're going to see more feminine aspects coming into play. When you are oppressing anyone, when you're putting yourself above anyone else, you're making them the weaker link, and that's still being in the shadow. There's an oppressor and an oppressed within that shadow. So it's not about doing that. It's about, because why would we want to do what not they? Like, because in the past, because I was going to say, why do we want to do what they do? It's here, I want to take this off. It's more about us recognizing, sorry, I'm messing with this Be Live thing. It's more about us recognizing that inequality of the past and then being like, I'm not going to be the oppressor in this time around. Like, I want to make sure that we are equal, that we're holding hands. It's about coming into the divine masculine and the divine feminine and coming together to co-create. And you have that within you too. It's not just externally, because you don't need a man to complete yourself. You don't need a woman to complete yourself. You are already complete inside. So it's about accessing that divine feminine and that divine masculine within yourself and co-creating with that aspect of yourself. You can choose to find that counterpart in the world and co-create that way, but that's not the only way, right? And it is what we do first internally that is going to then reflect externally. So when you can access those parts and pieces of you that feel wounded, that feel weak, and look at them, and then help to empower that piece of you, that wounded masculine or wounded feminine, then we are able to come into more balance, and then we shift out of weakness to equality. So it's definitely some internal work that needs to be done. We need to recognize our perceived weaknesses, and we need to shift our perception. Or we have to create routines, we have to create bargains with ourselves, we have to create agreements with ourselves for how am I going to empower this aspect of myself? How am I going to shift out of weakness? And how am I going to, it could be with knowledge that you are shifting out of it, like, okay, I don't know too much about this and I feel like it's my weakness, like then you can always like learn more about it, have more experience doing that, or you can just like immerse yourself in different experiences to get yourself more comfortable with that, right? Depending on what it is.
Weakness is not being able to stand up for myself, people pleaser. Julie says people pleaser too. I people pleaser. I still struggle with that. An open emotional center, and so sometimes it's hard for me to be around somebody who's angry at me or disappointed with me, and I just don't, it feels yucky. So with that, you have to know that sometimes you just can't identify with other people's emotions, and you just have to know that you have to love yourself and you have to be happy with yourself, and that your happiness is important above trying to make other people happy. And I don't know, like, this has come up a lot for me, just the image of you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to fill your own cup up, and nobody else can do that for you. So nobody else is, I used to say this with my parents all the time. Look, you're not paying my bills. You're not, responsible for my life. I am. And so I have to do the things that make me happy. So sometimes I'm going to have to tell you no, and you're going to have to be okay with it. Sometimes I'm going to do things that maybe you don't understand or agree with. And I used to put my value, right, on their perception of me. And that had to stop because it was affecting my sanity. It was affecting my happiness. It was affecting the way I was being able to function. And so just knowing that your happiness can come first, it's not selfish, it's actually very healthy, and that you have to do things for you. And almost back to the whole, like, you need to have clear communication. So have clear communication with people. And sometimes I know you don't want to disappoint them, but they're going to be happier in the long run if you just come at it from an honest standpoint, like, hey, I would really love to help you out. You know, I know you're moving next Sunday, but I just can't. Or I would really love to bake brownies for that bake sale, but I'm, you know, burning the candle at two ends. So I just can't do it. And people will understand. And here's what happens is what I find is that if you are kind of like half-assed showing up for people, people feel that. And then it becomes bitterness on their part. So it's really just coming at it with open communication, coming at it from a loving place, loving on you, loving on the other person, and just genuinely saying, you know, what you are feeling or what you can or can't commit to. And I think that just coming at that from the get-go is kind of the best policy there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Okay, Shauna also had a comment earlier. She said, my weakness is not being able to stand up for myself. And I think that also piggybacks upon what you were saying too. And so you have to ask yourself, why do you feel like you can't stand up for yourself? Is it because you fear your opinion being rejected? Is it because you fear the like perceived authority? Like, why do you feel like you can't stand up for yourself? Why do you feel like you have to be in almost that submissive position? And what is it you're trying to stand up for? And why do you feel why do you feel like you can't stand your ground? Or why do you feel like you're kind of uneasy being able to like use your voice? Is it a communication problem? Is it like, I don't know how to verbalize it? Or is it because you're scared of the other person coming at you with like, you're wrong, or I don't agree with you, or your opinion doesn't matter, or whatever the case may be? You have to ask yourself, like, what's going on? What stories are you telling yourself, and what expectations do you have when you do stand up for yourself? Do you think it's going to have a negative outcome or a positive outcome? Do you also feel like if you stand up for yourself, you're going to lose friends, or that the relationship's going to become like uneasy, or that an argument is going to happen? Maybe you're avoiding conflict. Maybe you're trying to like stay away from conflict, so you feel like I'm not going to stand up for myself because it's going to aggravate that person and they're going to come back at me. So you're afraid of like that backlash or that perceived fight that may or may not happen. So whenever you look at your weaknesses, you have to see like, why are they showing up? Why do I feel like I can't stand up for myself? Why do I feel, because this is a very submissive approach to it. Like, I feel like I can't stand up for myself. Like the whole I'm a victim of needing to like, you know, stand back and not stand in my power, because it's almost like giving power away to another person. Like being able to stand strong in your conviction, stand strong in your truth is a very empowering ability. And you just have to ask yourself, why? Why do I feel like I can't stand up for myself? And how are you going to shift that? And it's not going to just happen overnight. You're going to have different experiences and circumstances, and little by little, you'll be able to stand up for yourself. Like, no, I'm not okay with that. Also, think about boundaries, because they're also showing me boundaries. You may have a boundary issue where you feel like you're just going to let anybody come in and tell you what to do. You're going to let anybody come in and say, I need you to do this, say yes to this, you know, or they're doing something that you don't agree with, or you don't feel like is right, or they're overcrossing your personal boundaries. And because you're not strong in those boundaries, you let people like cross the line. So they're constantly crossing the line, and your circle is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because you're allowing more people to do things that you're not okay with. And so people continue to do that because they're like, oh, she doesn't have strong boundaries. I'm not saying that to you. That's what they're showing me is the whole boundary issue, because there's somebody on here that does. We all struggle with that, especially we want to be nice. We want people to like us. We want people to perceive us a certain way. And we think that if we say no to a person, they're not going to like us. And that might be, you just have to figure out what's the root of not being able to stand up for yourself, and just go from there, right?
Something I wanted to add too is, I know personally for me, two things. One, ask the other person for some space. If they're coming at you and you feel like you can't stand up for yourself, ask for some space. Sometimes it's hard to find the words. And you just need to get some emotional clarity, go take a lap, whatever it is that you need to do, right? Some people have a hard time expressing what they want to say too. So number two that is coming through for me is I feel like maybe it's could be a verbal issue too. So maybe writing your feelings down. Some people have a better time physically. Like if you need to go do something like with touch that you enjoy, to be able to get that energy out so that the words flow a little bit easier for you. So sometimes either writing or going for a walk or doing something, that way you have a minute to just kind of wrap your head around the situation and know what you want to say. So if you know, and my husband and I have kind of started doing this too, is he wants like things now. And you feel that pressure, like I have to answer his questions or I have to say something. And then you kind of shut down and you're like, I don't know what I want to say. Or I feel like I can't or I feel like I have to defend myself because this person is attacking me. Ask for some space, break your auras, get clarity, and then come back to the situation again once you're a little bit more grounded around it.
And because also, this is why another reason why knowing your human design chart, knowing how you receive energy, how you transmit energy is very important. Because if you have an open emotional center, you're sensing whatever they're putting out there. Because if they're transmitting their anger, if they're transmitting anything that makes you uncomfortable, you're going to feel that. And that might trigger you to shut down in your throat center, especially if it's an open throat center. Anytime there's pressure put there, it makes it very uncomfortable to get the words out. And I've always struggled. I'm not going to struggle anymore, but I have struggled in the past with being able to express my feelings because of my open throat center. And I'm not a victim of my open throat center. I just know that there's strategies to empower me in that area. And like she said, disconnect. Sometimes you need to walk away. Sometimes you need to call a friend. Sometimes you need to, because like she was saying, like you can move around, you can write it down. You just need to figure out what strategy works for you to get your truth out, to stand up for yourself. And when you feel bulldozed by another person who may be projecting, angry, and saying mean things to you or affecting you in a certain way, disconnect and be like, okay, we're going to come back at this later. Because when it's in a low vibration, you want to disconnect anyways, because it's really hard to shift out of that when both people's egos are wounded, right? Because when the ego's wounded, you're like, I'm going to put up my shield, I'm going to bring up my sword and let's fight, right? And so that's what happens. And so what needs to happen is that detach from the situation and know what empowers you to feel like you're in the gift frequency. It's all about shifting frequencies, right? Because when you can notice that you are getting offended, that you're wanting to lash back, you're wanting to react instead of respond, you need to pull yourself out of the situation. Because if you can't shift in the moment, you can't shift your shit in the moment, it's time to take a step back and look at it from a different perspective. You can either be like, hey girl, I need to tell you about what just happened with my husband. I need a new perspective. And you can have your lifeline help you shift your shit. So it's important for you to understand who your backup partners are and who you're going to call and who has not just your back, but like honors your whole relationship. Because it's not just about like who's right or wrong. It's about having that friend that's going to be like, I honor both of you, and I'm seeing it from like an unbiased perspective, and this is what you need to do, or this is how you need to see it. Because it's all about having options. When you feel like you're boxed in, when you feel like you're cornered and you don't have options, then that's when we always attack and we rebel and we're like, no, or we put up our walls. So like, how can we empower ourselves by giving ourselves a lot of options, possibilities? How are we able to shift that, because to shift it, we need to take a different door, because the door we're in right now is not working out for us. So like to shift it, you need to back out of that door and be like, what's another possibility? What's another way of looking at it? What's another perspective? How can I empower myself? And that's all you have to do is take a moment to pull yourself out of the situation, be mindful of how you are acting, reacting, thinking, feeling. Look at everything that's showing up in your body. Where is pain showing up? Where is uncomfortableness showing up? Where do you feel uneasy? What emotions are showing up for you? Take a moment to take inventory of yourself, because your body and your intuition are trying to tell you things, and because your ego is so wounded, you're like, can't see it. It's just cloudy. It's just veiled, right? And so that's what we need to do, is take a step back. Let me see if we have any. Shauna, I tend to drop my sword and cry for a while. I used to do that too. Like, I would used to, after, like, before, I used to be the one, okay, you want to fight? Fight, let's fight. And then we'll like sword fight for a while, and we'll like react back and forth with each other. But I used to do that too, where when I started the spiritual journey, I was like, okay, I know that I don't want to fight, so I'm just gonna like put my shield up, and I'm gonna cry behind my shield, or hold stuff in, or I walk away. And that's not always the good case either, because if you are walking away from the situation, they feel like they're not heard. So it's like, you can separate, but make sure that both parties know, like, it's not because I'm slapping you in the face and saying, I don't want to hear what you have to say. It's more like, I need this for me. It's not about you. The more we can look at the situation and be like, it's not about me, it's not about you, the better we are in the situation, right?
That's right, you too.
Tammy says, okay, this is for you. Tammy says, all my centers are colored in. What does that mean? What does that mean, Brittany?
So when all of your centers are colored in, it means that you have a defined way of accessing those. So like for your throat, you have access to your voice. For your emotions, you have a fixed way of feeling things emotionally. For your identity center, you have a fixed way of knowing who you are in this world, kind of your place and the direction in which you're going. So neither are good or bad. It's not like, oh, this is fixed and I'm boxed in, or this is open and that makes me susceptible to other people's energies. It's not at all. Everything has a beautiful way in which it relates to the world. So the fact that everything is colored in for you, it just means you have definition in your chart and you have access to those things. So it can be a really beautiful thing. When you're around maybe people that have open centers, you're going to tend to attract certain people that have open centers in their charts. How you guys relate together too.
Yeah, and also remember that when a center is colored in, that's what you're transmitting out. When a center is open, that's how you're receiving. So that means all of your centers are transmitting, right? You're transmitting, you're giving out energy, you're giving out information so that anybody can plug into you. What you'll find may be difficult is pausing yourself for a second so that you can receive from the other person. Because if that means everybody's going to be receiving from you and you're not receiving anything from anybody else, right? That doesn't mean that you can't open a center, because energy is energy, and you can make any of them open. I feel like they're fluid and sometimes they open and close depending, but your status quo is always transmitting. And so you'll find yourself in your head a lot. You'll find yourself going certain ways a lot, and you're very like, this is how it is for you. And so that also might come off to other people like, why is she not understanding me? You know, because you understand yourself. You're transmitting. It's like, but you need to figure out how you can understand yourself and compare that to what another person is saying to you or feeling, so that you can connect to them in that way. Because there is no way for you to connect and receive when it's closed like that. So find different ways to understand a person, because that way you're coming at it to any situation where you are valuing yourself and valuing them, because you're all one and the same, right?
Being a good listener is going to be important for you, Kimmy. Listening and just being able to asking questions, right? So you may not understand it, and it's not your job to understand it, but you can ask questions anyways, right? So that you can try and gain a little bit more clarity around why a person does it this way, or why a person behaves a certain way. It may not make sense to you, but you can still be open to listening. That's always helpful. And then always just trying to ask questions to learn more. Because you do have that closed or defined head centers, you're going to naturally be inquisitive anyways. So.
Exactly. And Tammy was also saying that she could be very rigid. So remember, you want to know like how you process things, how you interpret things, who you are, what you feel. You want to know all those things, but you don't want to be so rigid that you're not allowing for anything else to come in. Because what happens too is like when you have that defined center, that doesn't mean it's constantly like that doesn't mean there's energy constantly available to it, but until you allow flexibility, nothing else can get in. So if you're trying to meditate and receive downloads or receive information, if you're rigid and you just keep saying, I'm not going to be open to different ways of thinking, I'm not going to be open to that, and you're just rigid, you're putting yourself in a box, and you don't want to put yourself in a box. You want to be open. You want to be open to new ideas, new possibilities, new things to come in, because Source is going to want to speak to you in different ways. And if you have all closed centers, it's about being flexible. It's about being flexible in those centers to allow for more to come in, right? So that's really important. We're going to take one more, and then we're going to have to hop off because we've already been on for like an hour. So Jonna, I think Jonna, not Johanna. It's Jonna. My fear, she has a fear of conflict, inflicting discomfort. The warrior is a child. So a fear of conflict, you have a fear of conflict. So do you feel like, because that's gene key 6. So you can feel like that's like one of your weaknesses is you fear conflict, right? And so what happens, so noisy here, sorry. What happens when conflict arises? Do you feel like you're automatically on the defense? Do you feel like you run away from it? Do you feel like you don't stand your ground and you shove everything under the rug? You have to see like, what do you do to avoid conflict or to pursue conflict? Because there's people who are the aggressors and there's people who are like feel like they are the ones being attacked, right? So are you charging or are you hiding? How do you handle conflict? Because if you see that as a weakness, you have the unique ability to turn that into a gift where you are a diplomat or where you radiate peace. So because that's what that gene key is about. Gene key 6 is about being diplomacy is the gift and peace is the city. So like, how can you turn that shadow into a strength? So you just have to look into how are you handling conflict? She said, I hide, I shut down my truth. So you want to hide. You don't want that conflict to happen because first of all, it's uneasy, it's uncomfortable. I want to venture to guess that you probably have gate 6 or gene key 6 in your profile, because usually you'll hide or you'll try to put things under the rug or avoid the conflict. Like people that have gene key 6 in their profile can sense conflict before it's even here. And so what will happen is we'll create tendencies to like hide from it or you'll avoid that person because you know like a fight might happen. And then because you don't want to rock the boat, because you don't want to make waves, you don't speak your truth. And therefore you are suppressing yourself and you are giving your power away to someone else because that's still the shadow frequency. Do you have anything to add about that, Brittany?
Yeah. Also, like Open Identity Center. And that's the yellow triangle in your chart. If that's open, or if any of the throat channels make it to the identity center, you're a little overly sensitive to criticism. And the only reason I say that is because those are the telltale signs of like in your chart, like that. It's almost like that turtle. Like you're just like, you know, you might be at the edge of the road and the car is coming and you just tuck into your shell because you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so scared of what's going to happen. And so for you, kind of being able to shift out of that is just knowing that one, sometimes you can get in your own way. Sometimes you can bring on the conflict by avoiding it and making it worse. So on the flip side of that, knowing that sometimes just going in and biting the bullet, so to speak, and just getting the conflict over with, or you're projecting that conflict before it's even happened sometimes too. So you're already wanting to shy away from the situation because you're perceiving a conflict that isn't even there yet. So my thing would just be as like a healthy, like, think about like, is this coming from someplace else? Is this coming from me, or is this coming from someplace else? And if it's coming from someplace else, it's not really my problem. I don't really have to shy away from this conflict that isn't even coming from inside of me. So that would be my suggestion, is, you know, to know that that can happen when you're avoiding conflict, and just know that conflict actually doesn't have to be a bad thing. There's a lot of resolutions that can come out of conflict, like for the better. Like, I know we perceive it as bad, but just because there's conflict between two people doesn't mean that like disastrous things are going to happen, right? So sometimes we get into conflict and we think like, oh, like that went a lot better than I thought it was going to. I had this like giant, like in my mind of what was going to happen, and what actually happened was like a molehill, you know?
Yeah, remember what we said about expectations. You need to be detached from the outcome, detached from what you're perceiving. You can't have expectations for how it can go. And also, I want to also say that PTSD does play a role in how you handle conflicts too, because I know that you said that safety was an issue for you in the past or the present or whatever. So if you feel like when you speak your truth, when you create conflict, or when conflict comes to you, there's always going to be a physical ramification for that. Like, you're going to be physically abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused. And I know that that can trigger some PTSD symptoms. And so it's our job to, because those are what you were feeling, and it created this big uneasiness because you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be hit. I don't want this to happen. And whenever your safety's at stake, it's like, that situation is not good. You should leave it. That person should not be in your life. It's time to go, because it's also you standing up for yourself and your safety and who you are, and knowing that to be who you are, that person is going to abuse you. It's not okay. Like, it's time to walk away. It's time to walk away because you're honoring yourself. You are valuing yourself, and you're not letting anybody be a oppressor to you. So it's like leaving that situation. And then in the future, you'll feel, whenever a conflict arises, you're going to feel that same symptom, that same PTSD within your body, because it's going to come at you, and you're going to be like, oh my God, in the past, it always ended up being physical. And it's like, I can't speak my truth. I can't rock the boat. I can't stand my ground, because what happened last time, what happened in the past, I was beat down, either emotionally, physically, whatever the case may be, energetically. And so it's about healing that, and it's about empowering yourself and having those situations where you're like, let's just see what happens. I feel like I can open, because when you open yourself up to that person and then realize that they're not here to hurt you, it starts healing those symptoms of the past, because you're like, because it was like that before doesn't mean it's like that now. So the only way you're going to heal that is by being comfortable in a relationship, and allowing those fights to occur, and letting your heart be open to that. Because once you know that you can't be hurt is when the real growth will start happening, and you'll start releasing that stuff.
And when you start loving yourself, your value is not determined by, if I get into a fight with this person, they're not going to be my friend, or they're going to not love me, or you put your self-worth in other people. And when you love yourself so much to where it doesn't matter if you get into a fight, it doesn't matter. Like, you have that sense of self-worth. Your self-worth is not tied up in other people. So it becomes a whole new ball game. Like, you know, with myself and my parents, I was never allowed to enter into conflict without them like not loving me. They would love me whenever I made decisions that they felt like were right, or they wanted me to make, and then their love was high. And then when I made decisions that they didn't agree with, they took that love off the table. And so as an adult, that was a huge struggle for me, because I had a hard time finding my voice. I had a hard time standing up for myself. I had a hard time with conflict, because anytime I would rock the boat, then that love was taken away, and my self-value plummeted.
Conditional love.
Yes.
And in this gene key, it talks about there is no other, like, equality and tenderness. They talk about it being the relationship between the parent and child, because that love is so unconditional. But when you grow up around an environment where it is conditional love, then it really messes with your perception of what love is supposed to be, and how you're supposed to love yourself too, you know? And I can see how that can affect you, and how you have to like get how you have had to get over it and change your perception and open your heart to other people, and even open your heart even when conflict is arising. It's like, how can you have an open heart while someone is attacking you? Because it's a perceived attack, right? When you can realize that it's that person and it's not you, it always goes back to that person. Then you can leave your heart open and know, like, what they're showing me too is like, when someone's coming at you and attacking you verbally, whatever the case may be, they are just crying out for love, for attention, to be heard, whatever. You know what breaks that up really quickly? Hugging them. Just freaking hug them. If they're angry at you, just hug them, and they'll start dropping their, like, how can you hug someone with a sword and a shield in your hand? You can't. So it's like they're either going to drop it or get away from you. And it's like, both the situation is solved. They just retreated. So now you don't have to like get that energy coming at you, or you just resolve the conflict, because it's like love is the focus. Love is the key here. And if we can shift their shit by staying in the frequency of love, then they won't feel attacked, because the reason they're attacking you is because they're perceiving your attack on them. And when you let them know, I'm not attacking you, I love you, then they're going to be like, why am I coming at this person, right? So that's, yeah. Let's see. Okay, guys, well, it is now a little after 11. I know that we came on late, so we've been on for about an hour. If you guys still have any comments, questions, let us know how you like this. This was our first Shift Your Shit, so let us know. Was it awesome? Was it great? What would you like to see happen here? We're still trying to see like what this is evolving into, or what we're going to do here. So next week we'll be going live again, and we're going to, we'll see if we're going to do the gene key, which is going to be next week, is doubt, inquiry, and truth. And that's, you have a lot going on there. Isn't that twice? That's twice for you. Yeah. So just to prepare for the rest of this week, I want you guys, like, your homework is to look at your perceived weaknesses, journal about them, figure out the root behind them, and I want you to figure out strategies for how you can empower yourself with that perceived weakness, because weakness is the seed for strength to grow. So I want you to look at that weakness and be like, there's so much potential, there's so many possibilities within this weakness, and it's not really a weakness, it's an opportunity. So instead of saying that they're your weaknesses, say they're your opportunities for growth, opportunities for prosperity, opportunities for whatever. I drank some tea today, and the yogi teas have like the little sayings on them. Today, for all you guys, your potential self is infinite, right? There is no like goal, there is no like level, it's infinite. So like the growth, the possibilities, everything that you guys can attain is infinite. There is no end game, there is just growth. And so the more you keep living, the more you keep growing. Don't stifle yourself, you know, don't look at your weaknesses and be like, they define me, right? It's more like, wow, unlimited potential, pure potentiality is here. You don't need to be defined by anything. Do you have anything to say? I'm trying to like
put those journaling exercises and the affirmations up as well. So if you guys didn't catch those or didn't write those down, I'm going to be posting those in the group as well. So you can, however you like to meditate or journal or whatever, you can kind of shift out of that frequency of fear and into the gift frequency. And
yeah, because the gifts are where it's at, guys. Woohoo! You don't want to be in the shadows. Okay, so the rest of this week, work on that and prepare yourself for next week. And I don't want you guys to put yourself in a box like, oh my God, next week I'm going to be doubting myself. No, we don't want you to go there. I want you to be like, okay, see truth in everything, or get curious or inquire about things. I don't want you guys to be frozen because we said that, because sometimes people just focus on the shadow and they're like, oh great, next week I'm going to be doubting everything. No, you're not. You're going to be curious about everything. So as we end this week, I want you guys to look at your weaknesses and find the seed for strength to grow in it. And I want you to make agreements with yourself to empower that aspect of yourself, because that's like either a wounded feminine or a wounded masculine that needs to be uplifted. So we're working on achieving homeostasis, achieving balance within ourselves, look at your divine masculine, look at your divine feminine, and be like, hey, what do I need to shift in my life? You can do meditations where you're asking for guidance from your divine masculine archetype or your divine feminine archetype. I may or may not do a gene key activation for this gene key. We'll see what I have on my plate and if I am going to release it. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week and know that we are all innately equal. We just have this perception of weakness. So like we are all equal at a subatomic level, at a soul level. Don't allow anyone else to label you as weak, including yourself. You are not weak. You are empowered, you are wonderful, you are amazing, and you have so much potential. And a weakness is just a seed for strength to grow. Okay? So thanks for hopping on with me. Just in time to go pick up my son.
Wrap it up.
Okay. Thanks so much for joining us. Me and Brittany need to hop off. We both need to go get our kids, I think, right? You too? Yeah. So thanks for joining us. This was awesome. We'll continue to do it. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye.